afternoon, Distributed. My name is Lois Newman. I am a Scrum Master and Customer Success Manager at Miro, and I have an educational background in psychology. So I really do spend all day, every day, looking at how customers are working, how they're using Miro, but more importantly, how they're operating in this new hybrid world. So this afternoon, I am going to be asking you to rethink your understanding of psychological safety in a hybrid world. So if there is one gift I could give you today, it would be this. Psychological safety is the key ingredient to a high-performing team. So it's not some of those traditional attributes that we think of like expertise, tenure, intelligence. It's this, psychological safety. Now, this actually isn't a new idea. So the term psychological safety was actually coined in the 1960s by Dr. Edgar Schein, and it's been studied very intently for the last 3 decades by Dr. Amy Edmondson. Now, what Dr. Edmondson found when she was studying large groups of medical professionals is that doctors and nurses were much more likely to admit to making mistakes when they felt psychologically safe. So this is a bit of a groundbreaking finding, right? If you have doctors and nurses willing to admit to making mistakes, you've then got medical environments and institutions that are able to change their processes and actually improve patient outcomes. So shortly after these findings from Edmondson in the 90s, Google came along and found exactly the same thing when they were studying their highest performing teams. So despite the fact that we know this, along my travels, I've noticed when I mention the term psychological safety, I get a couple of eye rolls. And that's led me to believe that maybe there are some misconceptions out there about what psychological safety actually is. So some of these misconceptions are, yeah, Lois, we understand psychological safety. It's about being nice to one another. It's about the team having a good happiness metric. Don't worry, Lois, we've got psychological safety covered because we have an agile coach. Or, yeah, we're sorted because we run a digital cocktail hour once every 2 weeks. So I want to tell you straight up that that is absolutely not what psychological safety is about. So today, during this session, I'm going to tell you what it is not. I'm going to highlight some of the key research. And then most importantly, I'm actually going to show you how I build and foster psychological safety in my own hybrid teams using Miro. So obviously keep your chats coming through and I'll respond to some of your questions at the end. So in the chat bot, I am really curious to hear who in this session today has seen the film The Devil Wears Prada. So give me a yes in the chat if you've seen this film. So I'm just waiting for some of those messages to come through. Yes, okay, great. Overwhelming majority have seen that film. Awesome. For those of you on the session today who haven't, The Devil Wears Prada is a really great modern day depiction of toxic work culture. And essentially that young people need to accept exploitation and bad behavior from seniors to be successful. So the reason why I've used the Devil Wears Prada analogy today is because I regularly joke with my own friends and family that my entry into the workforce was the same as Anne Hathaway's entry into Meryl Streep's office. So my story actually starts in 2012 when I was interning in London. And I did a lot of standard intern tasks like coffee runs, photocopying, walking the office dog. But what I realized about this internship very quickly is that feedback wasn't accepted and it was best for me to just head down and get on with the job. I also noticed that there was a lot of blame culture and I felt quite unsafe in this environment. So I didn't last long in this internship. And actually, I eventually left because I realized that this opportunity wasn't worth my mental health. Now, what I realized in the first year of my career, I actually learned the biggest lesson of my career. And that was that the task or the job doesn't matter so much to me, but the environment, the team dynamics, and my relationship to my manager and my peers absolutely does. So in a turn of events, I left corporate London and I took a role as a hotel housekeeper. And I was much happier scrubbing toilets and making beds than I was in the unsafe environment. And so the reason I have shared this quite personal story with you today is because I have been on a personal mission ever since to stop individuals, teams, and leaders from having their very own Devil Wears Prada moment. So let's get into it. What actually is psychological safety? So at the beginning of the session today, I mentioned some of those misconceptions. So psychological safety is about happiness, being nice, having an agile coach. So remember, that is not what psychological safety is. Simply put, psychological safety is when trust permeates a whole group of people. So what we have in front of you on the screen today is something I like to call the psychological safety wheel. So as a team or a group of people completes one behavior on the wheel, they move to the next. So if we have a team environment where individuals have a really high comfort level in admitting to making mistakes, what happens is they start to learn from their failures. So when we're sharing and admitting to making mistakes, we pick up on the mistakes that our colleagues are making and we start to make adjustments and learn from those mistakes. And so in this scenario here, learning from failure is a real positive thing. We're all humans, we all make mistakes, but if we can find that comfort level in sharing and talking about those mistakes, we're going to be much better off. So as a team, when we are in learning failure culture, a really beautiful thing happens. We start to authentically show up to work. We start sharing our ideas and we start being more authentic. Now, when that happens, teams move into a space where they are making better decisions and they are more innovative. Now, innovation is a huge topic at the moment, and I know that the distributed crowd are all interested in innovation. So when I am saying psychological safety is the key ingredient to a high-performing team, this space here in front of you is absolutely what I'm talking about. You can almost guarantee that the highest performing teams in any organization are sitting in that space, and that is because they have that high level of trust that is permeated across that group. So this is why it is so important right now to be focused on psychological safety and explicitly the activities to help us build it. So it is important for me to discuss the space of psychological danger. So think about this safety wheel, if you will, as a series of red flags. And these are red flags that we should be observing whenever we're at work. So unlike the green psychological safety wheel I just showed you, teams that are in a more dangerous space are teams that have a high fear level in admitting to making mistakes. So this team is often more quiet, they're more shut down, they're not sharing ideas as freely, and they have a fear that they might be punished for sharing their mistakes. Or they have data points to suggest that if you share your mistakes, you'll be reprimanded. So in this kind of space or culture, you have higher levels of blaming people, tools, and processes. Now, in this space for teams, because they're not sharing ideas and they're being authentic, what happens is this team will move into a space called the common knowledge effect. Now, the common knowledge effect is where everyone in a room shares the most commonly held opinion. Now, that's because it's safe. Silence is safe. So if we want to be innovative and we want to be more creative, and start shipping and building products more quickly, this is the space that we want to avoid. No creativity is happening in this space. So just a little bit of research to really hammer the point home and to kind of highlight why psychological safety is so important for team dynamics. So MIT did a really great study where they had groups of 10, so 10 participants in a group, and there were 10 groups. And these groups were given the task of creating a survival guide for surviving on a desert island. Now, what the groups didn't realize is that in a couple of the groups, they were randomly assigned a survival expert. So these researchers hypothesized that the groups with the survival expert are going to outperform those that don't have a survival expert. And honestly, when I looked at this information, that is exactly what I believe to be true. But this is not what researchers found. So researchers actually found that team performance is more associated to how the team works together than who is actually on the team. So taking that one step further, the intelligence of a team as a whole is not correlated to individuals' intelligence. So instead, it's about equality in distribution of conversational turn-taking. So when the researchers were looking at these individuals and these groups, the groups that had the microphone and were sharing the microphone and sharing ideas had much better survival plans than those that just had an expert. So really, really fascinating research. And simply put, it means that as organizations and as businesses, we are spending far too much time optimizing for individual hires and too little time thinking about the team and how the team is working. So this is where things get a little bit tricky, and I'm going to need you to come on this journey with me. Yes, that is an AI-generated image of Meryl Streep working from home. So the research I've just presented, the MIT research, was observing people in an in-person environment. So think about that office environment. Very easy for researchers to look at the dynamics across teams. There's actually very little research out there at the moment that has observed how hybrid teams are working. But there was one really good study in 2022. A group of researchers in Norway were asking various distributed teams to report on their levels of psychological safety when they were working remotely. And a group of software engineers were actually reporting much lower levels of psychological safety when they were working from home. Now, this was because it was less easy to communicate with colleagues when they were on Zoom and people were muted. Human interactions were not nearly as organic, and a heavy reliance on written text meant that people couldn't pick up tone of voice or the nuance. So that leaves us with a bit of a problem, right? If I've come on this distributed session today and said that psychological safety is the key ingredient to a high-performing team, but I've now told you that the way in which we're working is a barrier, that leaves us with a problem, right? And that is a problem I have solved, and I want to highlight how you can fix that problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the 5 key strategies that you need to employ to actually build and foster psychological safety. And I'm going to show you how I do it in Miro. So there are 5 strategies to building psychological safety. And if you associate an activity to these strategies, these apply in any environment. So if you're working in the office, great, you can use these. If you're working in a hybrid environment, even better. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you what the strategy is. I'm going to tell you why it's important. And then I'm going to actually show you how I do it in Miro. So the first strategy to building psychological safety is proactive boundary setting. So proactive boundary setting is essentially saying as an individual, I am okay with this at work, I am not okay with this, and I have the autonomy to communicate that to you. Now, proactive boundary setting is really important because humans who have autonomy at work are going to outperform those that don't. So what do I do in Miro? So in Miro, with my teams and my customers, I always recommend spinning up a board and developing a team code of conduct. Now, as a Scrum Master, I'm a big Agile fan. And for those of you that are using Agile at the moment, will be very familiar with the team code of conduct. But if you're not in an Agile team right now, I strongly recommend that each team within a business develops their code of conduct. This can be a living document that sits in a Miro board. And essentially what you do is you bring the team together to agree on the team's responsibilities and to identify the behaviors that they want to hold each other accountable for. Now, a couple of examples here from my own team. We have a couple of line items about having notifications off outside of hours. We always respect a person's leave. So when we see that sick emoji or the palm tree emoji in Slack, we don't message our colleagues. We have 1 day per week of no internal meetings, which for us occurs on a Friday. And we have a team policy around saying no. Now, this is a really fun one. I'm not suggesting you all go back into the office or sit at home and say no, but saying no empowers us to kind of communicate how we're feeling about our capacity and load. So we say no because, so we are empowered as a team to provide the reason why, but we are always encouraging these behaviors that we've established in our team code of conduct. So that would be my first recommendation to helping you proactively set boundaries. So the next strategy or pillar is high frequency feedback. So if we go back to the psychological safety wheel I communicated earlier, when we get people openly sharing ideas and in a cadence of regular feedback, some really great things happen. And feedback is two ways, right? It's me providing feedback to my peers, to my manager, to my team, and it's also receiving feedback from those individuals as well. Now, in Miro, what I do to make sure that I am fostering an environment of high frequency feedback is I always do a retro. Retros are so important. And again, if you're not in an Agile team right now, don't be off put. Retros are for every single team. I absolutely love a retro. It really is just the opportunity to look at what a team has completed in a period of time and to reflect on actions moving forward. Now, the trick here to create a high frequency feedback environment is to make sure that you're stacking retros in the same place. So I have a single board and all of my retros for the whole year are logged in an entire board. Now, the reason for this is because I want the team to know that all feedback is respected and warranted, and I keep all of the feedback. I'm not trying to erase anything that might be a little bit messy. So as a Scrum Master, it's very interesting because I can collect data points over time. I can actually analyze sentiment so I can understand how the team are tracking. And if I was to do a retro in isolation or to delete a retro board, I would possibly lose this information. Now, the other tip I have for you today is to create a feedback space in a Miro board. Now, this feedback space is open to the team 24/7. So what you're doing here is you're signaling to the team that when you have feedback, give it to us. We want it. Feedback is gold. And so this space here, open 24/7, the team, when they think of some feedback, they drop it into the board and it's available to myself and the leadership whenever they want it. Now, what is really good here is it's a very light and easy way to collect feedback, and it gets rid of the stagnant engagement surveys that we kind of have once a quarter. So in tandem, creating a high frequency feedback means that you need to be asking the team for their opinion as much as possible. So I always encourage voting. So getting the team to participate in solutions and voting on solutions and getting their ideas signals to them that you care about what they have to say. And also getting feedback from people that are really close to the work is the best way to determine an approach moving forward. Private mode as well is going to allow you to also anonymize sessions and to make sure that you're kind of getting really authentic feedback and stopping that common knowledge effect that I spoke to you earlier. Great. So the third strategy we can employ to foster and build psychological safety is role modeling. Now, role modeling is not just for leaders. Role modeling is really important for the entire team to be doing. So role modeling is embodying behavior and saying that you're going to hold yourself and your team accountable for specific behaviors. So remember that code of conduct I mentioned earlier? That kind of ties in nicely to role modeling. Now, what we do in my team is, this is my leader, Nicole. We actually carved out a specific kind of corner for Nicole in our team space. And this is for Nicole to be very candid and honest with us. And what Nicole does is she will always identify if she's having challenges, but also if she's made mistakes. So she is actually encouraging and role modeling that behavior. And it's really great to see, because when you see a leader do that, you yourself then feel kind of comfort in admitting to making mistakes, and you're starting to get that trust permeating across a whole group. Now, Nicole is also the first one to hold us all accountable to that team code of conduct. So first person should be the first person to call you out if we've kind of not adhered to that team code of conduct. So reframing failure is the fourth strategy that I use to build psychological safety. And it's about that kind of learning space that we want to be in. It's about flipping the script and sitting in a space of learning rather than a space of blame. So what I do here is we have a team board, again, similar to Nicole's corner, where we really identify our mistakes and our challenges first. So at the team meeting, we're encouraged to talk about our mistakes first, because that is where the learning opportunity is. It's not necessarily in our wins or the things that are going well. It's about how we share our challenges as a team. Now, this has taken us a while to get to this point. So I'd encourage you to kind of start doing it, and you can start small. Start with the small oops and then maybe lead up to the bigger oops. But you can see here that very easy for the team to kind of talk about and discuss the mistakes that they're making directly in a Miro board. And lastly, letting the small bad things happen. This is strategy number 5. It is really important, and it is about saying it's okay to make mistakes. Small mistakes are good things. So what do I do here? Well, an example is making sure that all of my meetings are stacked in a single Miro board over time. Now, what this does is you can see all of those red sticky notes to the left are actually where we've made a mistake. And so what we've done in this Miro board is we've created this culture of letting small bad things happen. So whenever anyone comes into our team board, when everyone kind of speaks to us about our challenges, we have a record, and there's no shame in admitting to making mistakes. So that gives you a really nice kind of macro view of how we kind of operate within the team. So to summarize, and I'm going to come to your questions in a second, psychological safety is the key ingredient to a high-performing team. So previously in the office environment, we were able to rely on that organic connection, and we didn't have to be explicit about our strategies. But now we're working in a hybrid world where there are some barriers to creating that trust within a group. We need to be really proactive about thinking about the activities and how we can actually intertwine these activities in a team. So I gave the 5 strategies, and then I also showed you how I do that myself in a Miro board. So I'm just going to quickly come to my chat here. I've got about a minute left. I'm just going to have a look at some of the questions. So how large of a group are these boundaries for? Is it most of them are the same, but team codes are unique? So the kind of examples I've given today was in a team of 8. And I always think team code of conducts need to be very specific to kind of smaller teams. If you think about business values and higher level values, that kind of sits at a company layer. But those kind of those team code of conducts need to be very specific to that kind of functional group. So another question here, do the no internal meeting days include daily stand-ups? So we do include a daily stand-up. That is the one exception that we have, but that is 15 minutes that sits at the beginning of our day. And then the rest of the day is completely free. Now, the reason we keep it free is because it's really important as a team that we get a chance to reset, plan for the following week, and to also kind of regroup and actually do some of the work we need to do. Okay, so how important is private mode if psychological safety is high? So great question. If psychological safety is high, don't feel you need to trigger private mode. But private mode is maybe for some of those teams that are still feeling a little bit uncomfortable, and we're trying to tease out some of those authentic views. Okay, so that's a wrap. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here today. Please reach out if you want to contact me. Really, really appreciate your time, and I hope the session was helpful today. Thank you so much.